A lot of my female patients feel like their sense of multitasking and memory has really gone somewhere else. We refer to this as the bioenergetic crisis of the brain. And this is actually being referred to this way in the literature. By the way, when you look up menopause on the internet right now, it's everywhere. Why is this such a popular search term? Primarily because our OBGYNs really haven't received a lot of training on how to manage menopause. So they're having to go elsewhere. They're having to listen to podcasts, go to summits to learn what to do when they turn 50. Menopause is thought to be a neuroendocrine transition in females, ending with reproductive senescence, the inability to have children. But it also leads to a disruption of estrogen-regulated neurologic functions, things like thermoregulation, hello, hot flashes, sleep, circadian rhythms in general, mood, impairment of multiple cognitive domains, in addition to the cardiovascular, the collagen, and the bone health that we've been talking about already. So yes, it's a player with cognitive health. So what is this change that's occurring? This hypometabolic brain state is what they're referring to now of this critical timing theory around menopause, where the woman's brain, as there's a decline in estradiol, changes, not just in the amount of estrogen, but the ratio of estrogen alpha and beta receptors throughout the body and throughout the brain, leading to changes in what fuel source the neurons are using. Traditionally using glucose metabolism and now having to increasingly rely on fatty acid oxidation, ketones, and an alternative sources of fuel other than glucose. So estrogen, as I mentioned earlier, has this regulatory effect on glucose and insulin metabolism and sensitivity. In the neuron, it's acutely felt. Also, as estrogen levels decline, there's increasing reactive oxygen species, particularly in the mitochondria. And it's thought that this increasing reactive stress of oxidation in the mitochondria could be contributing to some of what we're seeing even in Alzheimer's disease. It is during this bioenergetic shift in metabolism, if you will, we call it the hypometabolic state of menopause. The brain appears to be the most vulnerable to this reactive oxygen stress in the mitochondria. It's the most vulnerable to laying down beta amyloid plaque and tau proteins, leading to dementia. Hormonal interventions given too late seem less effective. Hormonal interventions given early, critical timing, seem to be helpful. Does this sound familiar? Critical timing theory. We just talked about that with regards to cardiovascular prevention. So here we are again with the brain, another organ system with declining estrogen. But estrogen affects the brain's form, not just the biochemistry. We know that there is evidence of learning and memory that involves these dendrites and their remodeling and their ability to interact with each other, and that BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, aids in the number, size, complexity of these dendritic spines and these networking when it comes to our neuroplasticity. What a lot of us didn't know is that estrogen increases BDNF, just like exercise, just like meditation does, in the prefrontal cortex and in the hippocampus. Hippocampus, that's ringing some memory there. That's involved with memory and cognition. Who knew? This is basically looking at the effects of estrogen within the brain, and we know that it's not just contributing to a modulation of the reactive oxygen species in the mitochondria, but it's helping with these trophic BDNF factors in the brain and neuroplasticity and dendritic spines and increasing circulation to the prefrontal cortex and preventing loss of atrophy and the apoptosis that occurs of neurons. So it's sparing brain. Pretty cool stuff. This paper talks about how when you combine estradiol with BDNF as a growth factor, this is equaling neuroplasticity, and you need both to have this occur. This is a double-blinded trial just showing how there's increases in prefrontal cortex blood oxygenation and improvement in cognitive function when they test giving estrogen therapy versus not. Antioxidation is modulated not just as a benefit to the mitochondria in general, but it improves the redox status of the cell and helps to avoid oxidation and manipulation and modification of DNA, RNA, proteins, and oxidation of lipids, which can induce cell death. We think that this mitochondrial support and reactive oxygen species blunting that is there when estrogen is present is largely what keeps you from losing brain cells and having neurodegeneration. So is adequate estrogen needed to prevent Alzheimer's disease? We certainly have plausible mechanisms to explain that. We need more data in human trials. So this is a paper that's looking at the fact that we can now look at brain images, and this is looking at menopausal women, 40 to 60, and there is exhibited, and they can find changes, physiology, metabolic activity in the brain that's seen on functional MRI and other imaging studies that is consistent with an Alzheimer phenotype. And it's different looking on imaging than women that are premenopausal and that men that are age matched, which these perimenopausal and postmenopausal women have. Intervening early in these women to arrest these changes in this hypometabolic state with estradiol is something that should be really exciting to a lot of neurologists right now. This is the Cache County studies in Utah, which looked at women basically who used hormone therapy of any type within 5 years of menopause having 30% less risk of Alzheimer's, especially if it was given early. And now we think why, because if we can avoid those hypometabolic changes of oxidative stress, promote dendritic activity early on before it's lost, when estrogen goes away, they get better results. And when you waited longer, you didn't see that. So again, there's this critical window using hormone therapy could potentially mediate and mitigate some of the risk of Alzheimer's. The results showed that the longer the total life exposure was to hormone therapy, especially in older women, they had more cognitive status protection later in life. So duration matters. What about using conjugated equine estrogens alone in older postmenopausal women? It's not the same as 17-beta estradiol and some of these earlier memory trials. Now, this is very similar to the corollary with heart disease, where I made a difference between 17-beta estradiol and oral conjugated equine estrogen as far as risks. We know that the 65-year-olds in the WHI study and older that had 15 years past normal menopause, using oral conjugated equine estrogen didn't improve cognition. Remember, there's no progestins involved. This is just oral Premarin. Didn't help in the older women. Other randomized trials using 17-beta estradiol near the onset of menopause did show benefit in verbal and working memory. So again, these guys came to the conclusion that there's a critical period where giving estrogen can stave off cognitive loss. What does NAM say? This is the North American Menopause Society update 2022. Initially, they said, no, we don't want to have HRT at any age to prevent treatment or decline of cognition, dementia. However, hormone therapy is approved for women with premature menopause and surgical or natural ovarian function loss for prevention of bone loss, cognition, mood change, and heart disease. So which is it, guys? Yeah, it's confusing. It's not just about estrogen, though. It's also about progesterone. Progesterone is neuroprotective, especially after injury, like a traumatic brain injury. It activates MAP kinase pathways to prevent cell death, apoptosis of the neurons. Medroxyprogesterone acetate, the synthetic progesterones in the Women's Health Initiative, are not neuroprotective. And in fact, they negate the beneficial neurologic effects of estrogen when you give them alongside estrogen. Natural progesterone promotes myelin. That effect is blocked if you block progesterone. So the takeaways with cognition and HRT, the guidelines say it's not indicated for primary or secondary prevention of cognitive decline. The literature supports the benefits of both 17-beta-estradiol with progesterone early in menopause. Even in patients without a uterus that have cognitive decline as their priority, I always use both together for that reason. The combination of conjugated equine oral estrogens with synthetic progestins cause dementia in postmenopausal women, and in fact in any age, whether they're below 63, above 63. By itself, conjugated equine in older women over 63 didn't cause dementia, but it didn't help either. Estradiol studies have shown benefit in cognitive function, especially if given early relative to menopause, and we don't know of any data saying that it doesn't work as well in older women. So again, very different potentially from conjugated equine estrogen. We need more clinical human trials. New data, observational, and some of the clinical stuff has the mechanisms that are plausible. There's plenty of animal data supporting both estradiol and progesterone helping avoid Alzheimer's. At present, the data suggests that treating women close to menopause and as young as possible after going through the change, using the right estrogen in the right delivery system with non-synthetic progesterone, while being mindful of any of the comorbidities and the individual risks, has a potential for treating primary prevention of dementia.
Start your 7-day free trial at KarazianInstitute.com if you're a licensed healthcare practitioner ready to evolve your functional medicine practice. Explore over 300 hours of clinical training, masterclasses with leading functional medicine clinicians, and certification pathways. Or check out the Academy of Functional Nutrition and Lifestyle Medicine at afnlm.com. Whether you're on the path to certification as a functional nutritionist or simply want to optimize your own and your family's health, our skill-building approach builds real-world competence from the ground up. And lastly, if you're dealing with chronic health challenges, visit drknews.com for self-paced courses that help you understand and address fatigue, brain fog, autoimmune conditions, gut problems, and more using evidence-based approaches. The content on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health regimen. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe and share with someone who might benefit.